Drafting your pattern. Use Violin interfacing to draft the pattern size you require, or you can just draft them all out at one time. This saves the master pattern from being cut. Use a pen and a ruler. I draw the straight grain first and then the other straight grain line so that I know exactly where the pattern should be if it happens to move. Give the pattern a title, a pattern piece name, size, and any other cutting instructions such as markings. Then cut each pattern piece out. Nip the inside of the armhole to help you cut it out. I keep pattern pieces in a folder. Cutting the fabric. Fold your fabric selvage to selvage, so that's going with the straight grain, the selvage. Lay out your pattern pieces where they fit efficiently, which means you're saving on fabric as much as you can. The very first one that you should pin is the back and front pattern piece on the fold. Pin on the fold first, which secures it, lines it up, and then pin around. Place the sleeve on the straight grain, pin that down, and your sleeve cuff on the straight grain, pinning it down. I do the efficiency with the fabric because it's less scrap that you have to deal with. Pin through both layers of fabric so that it doesn't move, and then we're ready to cut. Cut the best edge around this pattern piece because that will be your hem edge and it'll leave a better edge for when you sew this. Grab the centre of the armhole and nip it, and then cut out in 4 directions to help you cut out the circle or oval of the armhole. When cutting, just move things around so they are at the angle for you. And make sure you put the markings into the armhole. If you don't do this now, at least you have the pattern pieces to do it with before you sew. And again with the sleeve, nip in 5mm to show the back and the top of the sleeve, which matches to the armhole markings. Cut out your cuff nice and straight. Sleeves. We're going to pin the right sides of the sleeves together for each sleeve, and the pins will go with a sharp point towards the armhole, and we'll sew from the armhole down to the wrist, and we'll use a 1cm seam allowance. We sew the seam from the armhole to the wrist just as we sew side seams from the armhole down to the waist, or shoulder seams from the neck out. It's all to do with sewing in the best direction. Take pins out, you don't want to sew those in. And trim threads at both ends of the seams. Repeat for the second sleeve. Sleeve cuffs. We're going to join the cuff at the side seam with the right sides facing. We're going to pin it together, sew it, and press. Being a bit efficient with the old sewing thread, a cuff like this, we can actually sew the next one just a centimetre away and we don't waste threads. Remember to reverse at the beginning and end of the seam to secure the seam ends. Next, we're going to fold the cuff in half lengthways. It reminds me of tube socks. And then you can pin it, and we're going to stay stitch around the edge 5mm from the edge, so that as we pin it together with the sleeve, the edges don't move, which is a bit of a hassle. Now once we've done this tube, we're going to divide it into 4 with pins. This is called cauterizing. Now the reason we do this is we're going to also divide the sleeve into quarters, and then we match them together, and then it gives us an equal amount of area that we have to fit together. So rather than having a great length of fabric to try and stretch or gather in between things, this way it makes it even for the finished look. So to put the cuff on, we stretch it over our fingers. This is a size 12, so it's pretty tiny. And then you match the pins and repin it. When you start sewing, pull the machine threads to the back, and I tend to hold on to them when I start to sew because I can't be bothered having issues, boo-boos that I have to fix with the unpicker. So as we sew the seam, do it slowly, it's tiny, you're curving. So taking your time means that you're going to get that 1 centimetre seam allowance, and it will be neat and relatively straight at the end. Once you've sewn this, you press the tidy little cuff towards the sleeve. Armhole seam. We need to stay stitch the top of the sleeves, that's called the sleeve head, and the armhole 5mm from the edge. This helps us fit it together. So we're going to put right sides facing of the sleeve to the body of the top, match the markings on the sleeve to the armhole, and use that stay stitching to fit it as we pin it together. So you might have to pull the stay stitching on the sleeve or the armhole, spread it out so it's even, and then we're going to sew that seam slowly. Have the top body, the front and the back, at the top, and pull that out as you sew so that you don't have a gathered, rumpled look. When you've finished, remove the stay stitching threads, and then we're going to clip into that seam to release tension on the curves. Right, the hem edge. First of all, you can either pin a 1 centimetre hem or just fold it as you sew. Hold those threads because this seam you don't want to have to keep undoing. You can sew with a zigzag stitch, running stitch, which is like a curvy line with little straight stitches in it, twin needle, parallel line with zigzag on the back, or a decorative stitch. I used the blind hem stitch. And the finished look, leave it open or pin it in a variety of ways, and if you want you can put a fastener on it like a button or a dome for your daughter to be able to do it herself. Have fun, happy sewing!